Hello everyone, Amy R here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and if you haven't been following me on my main Prairie Paper and Ink YouTube channel, I've been in a bit of a white and gold and black kick lately. I had done a video on here last month doing some grad cards using a bunch of Honeybee products doing white, gold, black. I don't know, I'm obsessed. So anyway, I pulled out, this is an oldie but goodie favorite. This is the Zen Bouquet stamp set from Honeybee it's one of their first sets that were released like way back in the beginning, and it's still one of my favorites. I've done so many videos using this set. I just love it. So this time I'm stamping it onto black cardstock. It's up to personal preference whether you want to cut it down first or not. I don't know if that even makes sense, but for me it's actually easier to have them in two separate pieces. I find it easier to work with. I find it easier to see, what's what. So I'd cut down the two pieces of cardstock. I just cut a piece of cardstock in half, like an 8.5 by 11 piece. And then I cut it in half again. So I have both of these pieces are 4 1/4 by 5.5. And I just line them back up side by side in my stamp platform. And I'm stamping this huge Zen Bouquet image onto it with some clear embossing ink. And I had used my anti-static powder tool first. And then I'm coating the image with, this is Nuvo Gold Enchantment embossing powder. This is, I think I've used this a few times before with other cards and whatnot, but it's not one I reach for often because it does have glitter in it. And depending on what I'm doing, I usually don't like the grittiness of glitter embossing powders. But I used the Nuvo black one the other day that had glitter in it, and I was like, ooh, this is really pretty. So I wanted to use the gold because I was like, ooh, fun. So it does have little like chunks of gold glitter in it. It gives it something else. So I coated the images with that and then melted it with my heat tool. And this will never get old. That moment when the embossing powder, especially when it's metallic, melts with the heat tool. It's just like, it's like magic every time. So I melted all of that with my heat tool. And then decided that since I have the stamp already lined up, kind of centered between two A2 pieces on that platform, rather than move it, I'm going to stamp the insides of my cards. So I'm going to funnel that embossing powder back in the container before I knock that over, because that's generally inevitable. And then I'm going to line up my card bases, which are heavyweight white cardstock. And I'm just going to do the exact same thing as I did on the black pieces, except this time I'm just going to stamp the image with Delicata Golden Glitz ink. Another like absolute obsession. And this again, when you stamp it, like you could stamp the outside of the cards like this. Like I've done several other ones recently that kind of same idea. I even thought about stamping the Zen Bouquet just in black, and then adding the gold splatter and like it for such a simple color combo. There's just limitless possibilities. But I just stamped on the inside of the card, just to give it that extra something, and because you got to use the Delicata Golden Glitz. It's just such a gorgeous ink. So I'd stamp that, set it aside, and then of course I got to add some splatter because you just have to. It's just what you do. So I put these pieces of black cardstock just in my splat box here to kind of keep from getting splatter absolutely everywhere. And I'm using Picket Fence Distress Paint for my white splatter. White gouache would work. I have like so many random, white craft paints, different things. I just grab whatever's handy usually. So I splattered that first, and then I'm also using my Gansai Tambi Starry colors, watercolors, and sprayed on some water and mixed up one of the golds, and then just put that on an acrylic block, splattered that on the background as well. And then I'm going to clean off my brush and my acrylic block and whatnot and set those panels aside so they can fully dry. So while those are drying, I'm going to start working on the other elements of the card, which I'm using sentiments from the Bloom stamp set, which was released not too long ago. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to use black cardstock, and I'm going to heat emboss these sentiments with that gold enchantment embossing powder. Normally, I would not do this. Like normally, I would use my go-to detail gold embossing powder, etc. But these sentiments aren't super fine. They're not really thin lines. They're not really small. So you can get away with it with this size. I wouldn't do anything smaller, sentiment-wise anyway, with embossing powders like this, because that glitter and the chunkiness will either just not stick enough to a fine line, or it'll just kind of undo you know, the legibility of it. So it works for some things. It worked on the main image. It worked on these sentiments just fine. I just wouldn't use it on anything really tiny detailed. If you're having a hard time, you know, you emboss little sentiments or something with a lot of fine detail, and the minute you emboss it, you lose that definition, or it just looks like a blob. Get a finer embossing powder, because, you know, there's ultra fine ones and there's ones that, you know, fine detail, etc., etc. But anything that says glitter, like glitter embossing powders, doesn't matter what it is. It's gonna be chunkier. That's just the way it is, because you got to have those little chunks of glitter. So anywho, random little aside. So I did that, and then I stamped the insides of the cards with more sentiments from the Bloom set, and I just stamped those with my VersaFine Claire Nocturne ink. And then for these black panels, I am just trimming off just a little bit. I wanted them to be slightly smaller than A2 sized, so that I can adhere them to the white card bases and have them, you know, kind of framed by that white cardstock. So I trimmed these down, and then I also had die cut sentiments using the Coordinating Bloom stamp set. There's a coordinating die set that has the 3 layers, which Honeybee does quite a bit of. So it'll have the word, then an outline, and then a second outline that has like piercing detail, etc. So the words I die cut from some Nuvo gold. This was gold pearl mirror cardstock, so it's not as reflective as some of the other ones. It's more the satin finish that I really like. So I die cut the word from that, and then the second, or like the first outline, I actually die cut from those black panels. This is not something I do very often, but I didn't want to cover up. I wanted to, you know, expose as much of that black panel with the Zen Bouquet as possible. So I die cut the outline from that black cardstock. Then I'm going to adhere my panel to the card base. And then I'm going to adhere the die cut in the outline to the second outline that has a piercing detail. That I die cut just from white cardstock. So that's going to kind of peek out around the sentiment, and then you're going to still see that kind of continuation of the Zen Bouquet. So it was just kind of a neat effect that I was like, ooh, I kind of like how this looks. So did that with both of these cards. Just did the die cutting and then just layered, stacked everything together, adhered it to the card base, and then the sentiments I die cut with the Banner Builder wafer dies, and then trimmed off the ends with my paper trimmer. And then I'm going to adhere those as well to the card fronts with my craft tacky glue. So then once I've got everything adhered the way I like it, I got to add a little bit more bling, because, you know, there's not enough, and I had to turn on my overhead lights because it was getting way too dark. It was like the camera just was having a hard time picking up the black on a black background, etc., etc. So I turned on my overhead lights, and then I pulled out some gold crystals from my stash and just kind of sprinkled those rather heavily throughout both of these cards. So I'm just adhering them into place with my jewel picker and more craft tacky glue. And then once I get these adhered into place, that's going to finish off both of these cards. So as always, if you are interested in any of the supplies I used or the pictures or anything like that, I will have all of that linked below the video in the video description. There'll be a link to a blog post, there'll be supply lists. All that stuff will be in the description box below the video for you to check out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and for subscribing and for thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. I really appreciate it. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.